everything rises and falls on leadership. Ultimately, if it's going to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
If there's something going on with a member of my organization, if there's somebody that's not cutting it, well, maybe it's because I allowed it. Maybe it's because I permitted it. And I know that carries a lot of weight, like, just to always pass the blame up, right? To say everything rises and falls on leadership, because a lot of times there's things that happen outside of our control as leaders, like, on your team and, in our family and different things like that. But even when things happen that are outside of our control, we can still control our response to it.
I'm Rhett.
And I'm Brandon.
And we're the House Dads, because we're dads who sell houses.
But we're also husbands, business owners, sports freaks, Christians,
friends, marketing nerds, TV show bingers, and so many more things.
Like so many of you, we're just trying to do it all, and we're trying to do it well.
And that's what we're here to talk about. What is up, everybody? Everybody listening, everybody watching, welcome to the 12th episode
1, 2
of House Dads.
Come on, man, we made
House
it.
Dads. Before we get started, you guys, we need to have a little family meeting.
Yes.
As House Dads, we do have to kind of gather the family together and have meetings about serious things, and we do have a request of everyone listening and watching.
Yes.
We'd like you to leave us a review.
Please.
You can go on Spotify. You can go on Apple. And I don't think YouTube has ratings.
I don't know. You can maybe type a comment or something.
Yeah, you could say good job. But either way, getting us some reviews helps us grow. It helps the, I don't know, they have algorithms to boost us up a little more.
Right.
It also makes us feel a little better.
Yeah, it does. It strokes our ego a little bit.
Yeah, five stars is good, but,
we just looked at it before. We're like, oh, somebody did it.
Yeah, we actually had some.
So
We had some, so that was good. Thank you for those that have left it.
We definitely appreciate those who have done it, but please, 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 just, tap them stars.
It's a quick tap. You can leave a little description if you want to as well, but that would mean the world to us.
For sure.
But yes, getting into it, episode 12, we have a good topic for you. I mean, we always think we got a good topic, but today we do. We're talking about extreme ownership.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The title, Everything Rises and Falls on Leadership, but focusing on extreme ownership.
Right.
So I'm excited to hear about it.
Me too. I'm excited to talk to you guys about it. Talk about it with Rhett. I think that this comes from a book that a lot of people. It is a super, super popular leadership book, and so we're going to dive into it here in a little bit. But I was thinking about this going into it. I had a couple friends say that, hey, I've been listening. But some of it they miss because they like, I'm not like in leadership at my company or anything like that. If you think about it in its simplest form, what is leadership? It's influence.
Yeah.
And so you have some kind of influence whether you think you do or you don't, right? So you don't have to be a boss. You don't have to be, at the top of your organization to get anything out of a leadership talk, right?
Yeah.
We're at the very least leading our own lives, leading our families, all those different things. So I hope that when we talk about extreme ownership of your life and in leading an organization or leading a team or leading whatever you're leading, that this doesn't miss you because you think, oh, well, I haven't hit that boss level yet.
No, this is applicable to many, many different stages, many different statuses, whatever.
That's right. Now, and with that same thing, whatever place or position you're at in your organization, it's really easy to point the finger at others when things aren't going well.
Oh, yeah, it's their fault.
Yeah, exactly. And then we do that naturally, like, it's so easy right now to point fingers at people in the government. It's so easy to point fingers at people in your organization or even in your family or your workplace, whatever it is. And I was thinking about like just one of the funniest times that I remember, like just silly passing the blame to other people. The Spider-Man meme where everybody's pointing at each other. And
three of them just pointing at each other.
Yeah, exactly. So our senior year of high school, going way back, because we're getting old, but we were playing Catholic in the first round of the playoffs. And I'll never forget, like our defense, man, we were tight. Like we would spend so much time with each other, not just at football practice, but like we did everything together.
Yeah.
And we were down in the first round of the playoffs against Catholic. It was the second time we played them that year, and we were down, and it looked like kind of a unsurmountable lead that they had, and so everybody was just mad. Everybody was just mad. We weren't doing well and everything. And I remember coming to the huddle to call the play. And
call the play? Were you quarterback?
No.
Okay.
Linebacker.
Okay.
And so I called the plays on defense.
Gotcha.
I got the play from Coach Carroll, called the play, And I had to break up the bickering between all of the people. And we were everybody, like cornerbacks pointing at the defensive line pointing at safeties pointing at me. I'm pointing at Coach Carroll, like, get the play in quicker. Like, it was just this, everybody pointing the blame because we were frustrated because we weren't doing well.
Right.
And so it's a silly example, but,
no,
like in football all those years ago, sports.
Emotions are running high when you think you maybe have done something wrong and you want to cast it on somebody else.
Exactly. And so that was the first thing that came to my mind. But, I mean, we tend to do it maybe less vocally and less like really pointing the finger like we did. But we do it behind the scenes a lot of times. Organizations and our families and things like that.
Especially, I mean, being in real estate, when something goes wrong with a deal, we want to have a good image with our clients, right? And there's times where, yes, it probably is somebody else's fault. And we could say, look, the lender didn't do a good job or the other agent did this. And I think as we talk more about this, we'll see, hey, is that really the best thing to point the fingers at somebody else?
That's right. So many of you have probably listened to the book Extreme Ownership, and it's Extreme Ownership, How Navy SEALs Lead and Win. And it's Jocko Willing and Leif Babin, and they discuss these essential leadership lessons. And it's one of the few books, I'll tell you, that I read and then listen to after.
You almost have to listen to it. Like it's that's one of the books that I've first started listening to audiobooks with, and I'm so glad it was that book. And I'm not a big like military type guy. I mean, I love the military. That was support the troops. To get canceled, support the troops. No, more so like just the rough, tough mentality. When I see like a military book, I'm not the most excited to pick it up. But this one had so many different elements of business and examples of them being on the battlefield.
Exactly. Yeah, Jocko tells these stories so well. Yeah, they're so intense and they're so high pressure that like when you listen to them, you feel like you're there. And so it's definitely worth listening to, worth reading. And that's why, honestly, it was hard for me in thinking about my family who served and is serving. It's hard for me to make the stretch for some of these principles, like when they're teaching life and death situations that are super, super serious, and then equate them to a real estate transaction.
A little different.
Or to equate them to parenting.
Yeah.
But the leadership lessons that they teach is absolutely applicable and really, really, really good to implement.
And that's why there's so many, I feel like, military books, because the principles that they are going through, that they're learning, that they're instilling in their lives, they're so applicable. Yes, they're at the extremely high level, but they're so applicable to just everyday life.
That's right.
It's crazy.
And so the main premise of Extreme Ownership and what we're going to be talking about today is taking absolute responsibility for everything that impacts you or your team and your team's mission. And so that includes the challenges, the successes, the failures, and everything in between. By really taking on that extreme ownership, I think what it is that's the start. That's like that's the catalyst to actually being able to solve problems, and stop pointing the finger at everybody else. So that's the whole thing. Everything rises and falls on leadership. That's what I believe. And I look at the different organizations and teams and in my family and in ministry and all these different things I look at and I say, okay, I think everything rises and falls on leadership. Ultimately, if it's going to be, it's up to me. If there's something going on with a member of my organization, if there's somebody that's not cutting it, well, maybe it's because I allowed it. Maybe it's because I permitted it. Maybe, and we're going to dive into a little bit more about that. But, and I know that carries a lot of weight. Like, just to always pass the blame up, right? To say everything rises and falls on leadership, because a lot of times there's things that happen outside of our control as leaders, like, on your team and, in our family and different things like that. But even when things happen that are outside of our control, we can still control our response to it. And we have to ask ourselves, even when these things do happen, was it preventable? Was there anything else that we could have done to change it in the first place?
You got to peel back the layers. You don't want to just look at the surface of the problem and, the person bringing it to you, you think they're the one that did it. But you got to peel back some layers and see, all right, what's the root? Where could we have prevented this? And I guess the premise of this is it peel back enough layers, it always falls.
It always goes back to the leader. Like, what could the leader have done differently to change this? How could we have reacted? How could we responded differently? And just before we dive into the specific ways that a leader would make sure that everybody grabs a hold of extreme ownership, I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, saying that leadership is just influence. So no matter what part of the organization that you're in, you have influence. But the question that I had to ask myself not too long ago when I didn't own my brokerage and things like that is, how do you lead up, right? Like when you are not the top of the totem pole, when you're not the end all be all and the decision maker in your organization or whatever you're a part of. How do you lead when you're not in charge? I think the interesting thing is a lot of times we say, oh, well, when I'm in charge or when I'm the boss or when I'm this, then we'll start implementing and doing things differently. But a lot of times, if you don't lead in the middle, you never actually get to the top.
Yeah. And I guess like you hear the term leader and you automatically think there's just one, right? But no, you're a leader. Like you're gonna be a group of leaders, a whole brokerage, a whole team. They're all leaders in some sort of way. It's not just somebody up here sitting on their throne in their fancy desk chair.
Exactly. Yeah. So just practically speaking, I put a few things down here that Jocko talks about in his book about how do you lead from when you're in the middle. And one of the things is that you are in charge of something. So whatever you're in charge of, take charge of it.
Yeah.
That's the simplest thing about extreme ownership, is that even if you feel like your task is mundane, even if you feel like what you're in charge of is not as important, take charge of it. Take ownership of it, right? And then when you do your task, whatever you're in charge of, and you do it well, then when you know that you've completed that and you've done it to the best of your ability and you've absolutely taken charge of it, then reach out and look to help other people.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to one of the earlier episodes of finding passion in your work. That was one of the things that helps you, in the middle of your mundane task or whatever you're doing at work, that's how you grow in it.
Right.
That's how it leads you to find other passions. And but taking ownership of it and just taking charge and then reaching out to other people that's a leader.
Yeah, exactly. That's what leaders do. And now I'll tell you this is something, and I think of it, I always kind of go back to like a sports example and look at like different times when like coaches challenge their players and things like that, and they're looking for a player to step up. I think when you're kind of in that middle management role, or when you're not leading from the top, you're leading from the middle, you do have to pick the places that you implement your leadership strategically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like when there's just a little hole in leadership and you just try and blast in there and say, well, I'm going to lead her, then you're bumping elbows and bumping shoulders with people that probably are like, back off, dude.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of self-awareness too, of knowing some people are led in different ways or feel empowered and like uplifted in certain different ways than others.
Exactly. So pick your spots wisely when you choose to step up in leadership.
Yeah.
When there's a leadership void, right, and when somebody actually needs you to step up, then it's going to be pretty plainly obvious. Then that's your time to step up.
Right.
That's your time to go above and beyond and to help other people. But it's easier to take ownership when you're the titled and the positioned leader, but the key to being a good leader is passing down that ownership to the other parts of your organization. Right? Absolutely. And so that's what we're going to talk about. It's a couple different points here today of how do you lead a team to actually take ownership in what they're doing. And the first thing is that leaders must have a resolute belief in the team's mission. You can't give somebody else what you don't possess.
Yeah.
Right? Like, if you're trying to cast a vision that you don't have, you cast in nothing.
There's no vision. Yeah.
Right. So you have to have a vision of the team's mission to actually be able to simply, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but you actually have to really have, you have to have a clear mission that you can communicate to others, and then you have to have a deep, resolute belief in it so that it permeates in everything that you're doing.
It's funny, we had a little team come to Jesus meeting yesterday, and a big chunk of it was, we have core values for our team. And I kind of asked the team, like, hey, do you guys know what our core values are? And, some people said, I think one's this or one's that, and we have a printed out sheet, and some of it pulled it out. And I said, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but this is my fault for not expressing our core values to you. Yes, I told you one day on a vision day just to have some core values, but no, like our team now needs to be, we need to add and take away team members, admin based on our core values.
That's
and
right.
Now I'm stepping up to make sure you guys know what they are.
That's right.
You got to know what they are to go by them,
That's right. That's a great point. And I'm glad that just happened, because it's so true that it's easy as a leader to say, y'all don't know the core values. Yeah. It's like, well, but man, we kind of haphazardly mentioned it one time at a meeting.
I gave you a sheet of paper. Exactly. You didn't keep it and study it.
You're supposed to memorize it and put it on your bed, put it by your bed every night. But no, it would be our fault. That's what taking extreme ownership is that we have to have a resolute belief in the team's mission, and then we got to make sure that we communicate it.
Yep.
And that leads to the second thing, and this is so pivotal, is that after we have that resolute belief in the team's mission, is that we have to put our ego and our personal motivations aside.
Yeah.
Right? Our ego and personal motivations have to be subordinate. They have to be secondary to the mission itself.
For sure.
Right? If the mission of the team is all about the leader, then the team's going to fail.
Yeah.
And the leader thinks that they may win. No. The leader don't win if the team doesn't win. So as a leader, it's our job to ensure that the mission gets done, not to worry about how people perceive our work,
right,
or not to worry about how easy it's going to be for us.
Yeah.
Because it's usually not.
One little tweak that I've made that I think makes a big difference is like when I started a team, going from solo agent to team,
right.
I changed my verbiage from me and I to we and our. Like if I get a new listing, if it's my listing, I still say we just got a new listing, and just little things like that. And it gives other people, they see that you're putting you're seeing it as a team.
I like that.
And they're feeling a little more, they're feeling like a team,
exactly.
feeling involved.
We just got this new listing.
So just that little tweak, and definitely catch myself. I've done it many times where I say, my team, and I'm like, whoa. No. It is our team. And it does. It's just I'm still in that process of tweaking the verbiage. But that little tweak makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And it's putting the ego away.
Exactly. It's putting the ego away, and it takes real strength of who you are, right?
Yeah.
Identifying who you are, knowing your character, so that you can put ego to the side. And the third thing is that you have to simplify and clarify. Right? And so we could have the vision, we can put our ego and our personal motivations aside, but we have to simplify and clarify.
Yeah.
We got to keep the mission as simple and clear as possible, because complexity causes confusion and it makes execution more difficult.
And you're saying basically the quote, there's so many different ways to say this quote, right. But it's complexity is the enemy of execution, I think.
100%.
Right? Is
that
what it is?
Exactly it.
But the harder something is, the less likely it is to be understood, for one, but executed as well.
That's right. Keep it simple, stupid. I've heard KISS. Yes, exactly. So,
keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah,
it's just every time.
Or keep it stupid, simple. I've heard it a couple different ways. No, I've heard it a couple different ways. But it really is that complexity. It makes people confused, and so when they're confused, they don't act in their best ability.
Yeah.
And so when you're leading a time, when you're leading a team, the simpler things that you can make, the simpler you can make things to other people, the easier it is for them to just act out of second nature.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not something that they have to think about. It's not something that's super complex. They can just do and be because you've created those structures and everything like that. So the simpler the strategy, the better. The fourth thing is work as a team, right? Work as a team. It's so pivotal to work as a team because like I talked about on the first one, is that leaders have to put our ego aside and make sure that even if it's more work on us as a leader, I think a lot of times leaders fall into the trap of, when I'm the boss or when I'm the leader, well, then I can just delegate and let everybody else do the mundane tasks, the more work. How many of you know that this? It would have been a lot easier to not have the team.
Yeah, absolutely.
It would have been a lot easier to not have the brokerage.
Yep.
It would have been a lot easier to not be the leader because then you just have to worry about your stuff.
Yeah, when you're answering for one person, it's a little easier than when you're answering for others as well.
Exactly. Got to put your ego to the side, and you have to work as a team.
Yeah.
All team members included and the leader. The fifth thing is this, and this is my favorite because it's so important. I think as leaders, it's so easy to pass the blame. Craig Rochelle says the forbidden phrase in leadership is this: my people won't.
My people won't.
Yeah. So when or my people can't, or my people don't.
Right.
He meant it like from a pastor in a church congregation, like my people just won't tithe. My people just won't pray. My people won't just serve.
Yeah.
Anytime when you're talking about your team or the people that you're leading and you say, my employees won't, my people won't.
I got you, yeah.
My team won't do this. If your team's not doing it, it's because you're not enforcing the standards.
Oof, yeah.
You're not casting division. You're not doing this. Jocko says it like this. It's very much like Craig Rochelle says. He says, when setting expectations, no matter what has been said or what has been written, if substandard performance is accepted and no one's held accountable and there are no consequences, that poor performance becomes the new standard. That's tough because sometimes you got to call out your best team member.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to call out poor attitudes and poor performance, even from some of your best people. But if you start to say, this is the expectation, this is our standard, this is what we want people to do, but then you let this person keep slipping on by, well, then that becomes the new standard for everybody.
Yeah. You got to set the minimum standards in place.
And uphold it. Yeah. And so, excuse me, it's going to be difficult sometimes to communicate that standards, but it's absolutely necessary. And a lot of people, will communicate standards, but actually reinforcing those standards by penalizing or having consequences for when people don't uphold the standards, excuse me, struggling here. In the long run, the team's going to suffer.
Yeah.
They're going to fall into this pattern of poor performance if we don't continue to implement kind of a consequence level. And I hate to use consequence and negative. You know, it's just there's got to be like, hey, at least pull you to the side of the office. Hey, we can't talk like that. We can't do like that. This is not what we're about.
It's hard to have those conversations because you have this fear of like, I don't want to. It's an awkward conversation, right? And you also. You don't want to upset people. You don't want to like push them away, especially if they're like adding value in some way. You don't want them to get their feelings hurt. But I think if you look back at your track record or look back at your, these points that we're saying, if you have been a good leader, like they're going to accept it well.
100%.
Right. And if they don't accept it well, that's a sign of, hey, I need to set more standards in place or communicate it better or whatnot. Yeah. But it is hard to have that conversation, no doubt. It is. But it's worth it, and you have to. It's crucial.
It's worth it, and if you have the emotional equity with them to have that conversation, and they know that you're not saying it for your benefit but for theirs, then that conversation becomes so much better because you're not telling it because you want to do something. It's because I know that this is going to help you, and I know the standards that you've set for yourself. Yeah. So, simply put, it's not what you preach; it's what you tolerate.
Oof, love it.
It's what you tolerate. So.
We need to get you some water. We need to sue this energy drink you were just drinking.
So the next thing for 6 is prioritize, execute, and stay flexible.
Stay flexible.
Define the few vital things that matter and get to work. A lot of times you try and master so many different things that you master nothing.
Yeah.
Right? It's like you got to focus on what you're good at. Focus on the few things that really matter and get to work on that. But while you're prioritizing and executing, you have to make sure that you stay flexible, right? Situations are changing. You got to make sure that the things that matter the most, the priorities that you have, if you lose sight of them, then you're going to start spending time on things that are not really important to you, and they get you off track and you lose sight of your priorities. Yeah,
staying flexible is key because, especially with someone who maybe a high D or just a type A personality that just like, hey, my way or the highway. If something comes and something changes, you got to be willing to, bend a little bit. You got to be willing to make sure it works.
100%. So, that covers what Jocko talks about as kind of the main principles of his book of Extreme Ownership. But one of the things that he talks about as the core principles as a leader is that discipline equals freedom. It's something that we've talked about throughout the course of all of our podcasts.
Yeah.
That a lot of times the lie that we give into when we think about leadership or when we think about being self-employed or running and managing business, we just want more time. We just want more freedom. We just want more money and all the things to enjoy. But discipline is what creates that freedom.
Yeah, you got to have discipline to create the freedom.
Exactly. And it's the same thing in our leadership and in our teams is that the leader, is what everybody wants to be. Yeah. Most people want to be. And it's
they think
they want to. But with leading and being a good leader, it takes a lot of work. You can't bring anybody to where you haven't been yourself. And so I think as a leader, we have to make sure that we don't expect something out of somebody else that we wouldn't do ourselves.
Yeah, that's so true.
So kind of in closing, and if you have anything else to add, I just want to ask, when you think about where you are in your life, in your business, and your personal lives, and your relationships, are you pointing the finger? Are you taking complete ownership for where you are in your organization and in your life? You have to ask yourself that question. Yeah. What can I take better ownership of?
Yeah, and some of the examples that they give in the book, or just in general, like things that have happened to you in life, it's you could easily say that legitimately was their fault. But again, it's just also a selfless mentality of like, you know what? Yes, maybe it is they did it, but I could have done this or said this or helped them this way before. Like it really does. It all falls back on. It can if you allow it to be. That's the key. Is you just have to choose to be like that.
Exactly. And if we don't see it as that way, if we just point the finger to everybody else, then nothing will ever change.
Yeah. What does that solve?
It solves nothing.
Someone says, "You're right. It was my fault." The problem's not solved.
Exactly. So even if it wasn't you, how can you fix that from happening again? That's what a leadership does. That's what a leader does. To take complete ownership.
Yeah. Just a quick example. Yesterday, I'm helping a seller. And we asked the buyer's agent a question about the inspection report, and he said, "Can you ask them this?" I said, "Yeah, I'll reach out to him." Asked them the question. They said, "Yeah, I'll get my assistant to get to you." Hours passed. The assistant never got to me. And I could have easily said to my seller, which I did at some point, I was like, hey, sorry, I can't help you because they haven't told me anything. Right. And then at some point I was like, you know what? No, I can do this myself. I took ownership of like, hey, I could have reached out to the inspector, which I did,
sure.
and got them what they needed to know. But like, it was so easy to say the other agent didn't do what they were supposed to do. But at the end of the day, I still have the ability to go get that answer myself, you know?
Absolutely.
So taking ownership. And the key word is extreme, because there's definitely going to be some instances where you're like, look, I could easily say it's their fault. I'm taking extreme ownership.
That's right. I know. It's too bad we didn't dim the lights. If you ever seen a Jocko podcast, dim the lights.
If you haven't looked Jocko up, go look this dude's jawline. Yeah. You're like, this dude's a Navy SEAL. Yeah, he's gracious.
Legit. He's legit.
And his voice.
I appreciate, man, his peek behind the curtain of everything he's been through and these leadership principles. You know, again, I know it's an extreme reach from life or death situations there to business or family, but it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. And again, your house dad's the theme. Like, just even if you're not a big high up in your work and your career, your family needs a leader, and they need someone to take extreme ownership of it. So
that's right.
Anything else to say?
No, that's it.
Love it. Well, hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, we would be so honored if you guys left us a review on Spotify and Apple, and watch us on YouTube. We had a YouTube video kind of pop off this week, so we'll see what happens.
Maybe we found the algorithm.
Maybe so. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in. Extreme ownership. Let us know any feedback you got, and of course, we're just so honored you spent some time with us today, and we will see you next episode.
See you next time.